and it's a ministry that God has birthed through me that was birthed out of a response to the issue of HIV and AIDS. And as that, we were intentional in ministering to the underserved, the marginalized, the disenfranchised. And one of those populations is people who are incarcerated. And upon doing the work in incarceral settings, specifically the Suffolk County House of Correction, I learned that people have the right to vote who are incarcerated in the state of Massachusetts if they are waiting pre-trial, if they are sentenced serving time for a misdemeanor. I also learned that they have the right to vote if they're serving felony conviction upon release of incarceration. If they're on probation or parole and they serve time for a sentence of a felony that their rights are restored upon coming back into community. I also learned that in Massachusetts, you could vote up until 2000, even serving a felony conviction, and that right was stripped from people who are incarcerated all across the state of Massachusetts in 2000 via Governor Cellucci, because people at MCI Norfolk, specifically the African American Coalition Committee, these are brothers who were writing legislation, these are brothers who were courting people who were running for office and changing the landscape of incarceral settings to be more about custody and caring, having programming that was rehabilitative. And those programs have dissolved because, again, now people who are serving felony convictions have been stripped of their right to vote in the state of Massachusetts. So Senator Miranda filed a bill, Senate Bill 524, that's sitting in the Ways and Means Committee as we stand. And we need people to call their senators, encourage other senators to vote favorably on Senate Bill 524 that will restore the right for people serving felony convictions to vote in presidential elections and municipal elections. It takes a constitutional amendment to restore the rights for people to vote for serving felony convictions in state elections. So that's a whole long process, but even you don't need a constitutional amendment, and you can simply call your senator, encourage every senator to vote favorably for Senate Bill 524, pull it from the floor, pull it from committee to the floor for a vote. And that would restore thousands of rights for people to vote in the state of Massachusetts who were serving felony convictions. We also sued the Secretary of State on the state of Massachusetts because in 2022, we passed the Votes Act that was actually giving people, that was making jail-based voting something that has to be implemented. And so we challenged the Secretary of State to make sure that everybody across the state of Massachusetts who has the right to vote knows that they have the right to vote, and they know how many people those people are. So that's some of the work that we're doing, but we're going to shift gears because Rachel Rollins is in the house.
Hi, and I brought a little brush. Make sure that my hair looks. People can know how the magic is really done.
Oh, you okay? Tell me the secret.
Right. Anyways, okay, we're putting our little brush there. How are you, my dear?
I am amazing. How are you?
Living the dream.
Amen. Amen. It is so good to see you.
It's good to be seen.
Amen. Bishop, can you help me out here? Okay. So one, again, it's good to see you. You're no stranger to me. I'm no stranger to you.
Correct.
We have worked intimately, making sure that people, I was just talking about people exercising the right that they have to vote in the Suffolk County House of Correction.
Correct.
And so you've come with us, as people may or may not know, before you decided to run for district attorney. Quite candidly, as you were going with us from unit to unit and being a part of our reflection circles and other opportunities, that you've been very intimately engaged with those who are incarcerated. Not to mention the fact that you have your own nonprofit organization, The Fort, that is about helping people to come back into the community. So again, no stranger. So I just want to thank you.
I appreciate that.
I want to thank you. And I know people behind the wall have encouraged you, said you need to run again.
Yeah.
And you
behind
did
the wall and out in community, but yes, they definitely have. I want to thank you as well. I mean, you got me involved, I think your organization, in recognizing more fully than I did how many people behind the wall actually have the ability to vote.
Yes.
And certainly in houses of corrections,
Yes.
as opposed to departments of corrections. So just even educating people about the fact that in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the only time you are not eligible to vote First of all, you have to be 18 or over.
Yes.
You have to be a citizen of the
Yes.
United States. And you have to be not serving a sentence for a felony.
Correct.
Those are important words. So serving, sentence, felony, right? So there are people in houses of corrections, as you know, Pastor, who have been charged with violent, serious crimes,
Yes.
but are not yet, haven't pled guilty or been found guilty.
Yes.
And even if they have, they haven't been sentenced yet. And before you're sentenced, after you're sentenced, some people get 3 weeks before they have to show up in the feds. Like, I see your face. The feds. I mean, don't talk to me about, white collar crime where it's like, okay, you're on the Vineyard this weekend. Oh, Nantucket next weekend. How about you surrender in 3 weeks after all of your vacations? So it is not just that you are sentenced, but that you are serving
Yes.
your sentence for a felony. That is the day that you are no longer eligible to vote. There's so much involved in getting people ballots when they're behind the wall,
Yes.
in making sure that their vote is then taken back and cast, right? Because they don't have the ability or the power to do that. They have all of these proxies, not of their choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Correctional officers or the sheriff themselves that oversees this. So yeah, we have to educate our community about the fact that we don't necessarily lose our right to vote if we are detained, depending on what that detention is.
Mm-hmm. This is a rhetorical question, but for our public and for it to be on the record, what is your position with regard to restoring the rights for people who are serving felony convictions to vote that was stripped from them in 2000?
I think there's precedent for us to have done it. As you said, that right was stripped 26 years ago now. So this isn't even a huge ask in the sense that we're not asking the Commonwealth to do something it's never done before. That's one. Two, when I was the district attorney of Suffolk County between 2019 and 2022, I had the privilege of traveling internationally to see how other countries handle substance use addiction, in Portugal, for example, and carceral facilities in Germany. And when I was in Germany, many European countries have caps on how long you can serve for homicide. So I'm not joking. In Germany, it's something like 12 or so years, right? They can extend that, but it's usually about that amount of time. And so when you are serving your sentence for even a murder, first of all, the grounds that they live on, I thought they were condos. They were beautiful, open air. They get training, woodworking, any skills they need, it is brought in. In order to be a correctional officer in Germany, you have to go to school for 2 additional years, because Germans look at individuals that harm as a failure of the German system, not as a failure of a person.
Wow.
It is that a system or a country failed you, a
Yes.
people failed you, not that you are a failure.
Love it.
And so they take that responsibility seriously, and they train their correctional officers to the highest levels, because they are dealing with individuals that need the most assistance, guidance, wraparound services, and quite frankly, love and support. So I was in awe of all places, Germany, right? Where you would think,
Right.
is there a compassion or with the world history of what we know of Germany. Many of them are on furlough. They leave to go to work and come back in the evening. Their families are allowed to visit.
Wow.
There's and when I tell you these grounds that they lived on,
Yes.
beautifully sort of manicured grass. I mean, nice, right? I would want to live there, right?
Sure.
So there's it's a long story, but just to say, when I said, well, what about voting? And they looked at me through translation, right? And said, what do you mean? Well, when they get out, are their voting rights revoked, right? Do they ever get to vote again? And they, after multiple translations, they said, no, we never take away the right to vote. And I said, what do you mean? And they said, because they're always German.
Right.
And so there's this, you have this national pride, this understanding of how important voting is, how important government is, how important civics are. that we all get a right to be involved in choosing our leaders, and you never stop being German. And there is that missing link, I think, in the United States, right? It's fascinating, even as we watched the United States men's soccer team, unfortunately, not do as well as we would have liked yesterday. When you see the roster,
Yes.
when you hear the accents,
Yes.
when you see that when our nation has to compete against other nations, we don't look like the secretariat of our president right now, which has very little diversity and is bland, right, and very homogenous. We are so textured and cultural here in the United States. None of us are without fault or bruising. And, I can speak personally about the power of redemption and just the importance of voting. And so I, in that long-winded response, would say, you bet I will support restoring that right. And I believe it would require lots of people to change their conduct, right? Not just to mention sheriffs, but governors, right? If the people that you're responsible for could actually vote you out of office, that really changes the way maybe you are interacting with them, treating them, looking at them, the humanity with which you engage with them in.
I love that, and thank you for that. I've talked with people. I'll be very transparent because that's what we need to be, right? Even our governor, right? I had an opportunity to ask her about Senate Bill 524 that sits in the Ways and Means Committee right now. That Senator Miranda wrote that is actually will restore the rights for people to vote serving felony convictions in presidential elections and municipal elections. Now, it takes a state constitution to restore the right to vote in state elections, but this will re-enfranchise thousands of people just by people calling their senators and that being and voting favorably for it and pull it into the floor for a vote. And so I asked her in her campaign. I was on a call with faith-based folks that were talking about supporting her in her candidacy, and I asked her point blank. One, they were inviting her to come to their congregations. I said, my congregation's behind the wall. Would you come behind the wall? And she said, yes. I said, do you support the right for people to vote that was taken from them in 2022? In 2000.
2000.
In 2000. And I said, would you support Senate Bill 524? Would you vote favor? And she said, well, I love Senator Miranda. I got to talk to her. And I have some thoughts about that, but would not unequivocally say what you just said.
Right.
And I think we need that. And I asked Sheriff Tompkins, who sat right in that same seat, and he said unequivocally, yes.
Yeah.
So with that said, thank you for that answer. And I love what you said about the custody and care models.
Yeah.
And Sheriff Tompkins has a program called the Evolve program at the Nashua Street Jail.
Yeah.
That's meant to be a model of custody and care. And it's working with mental health, it's working with BMC, and it's as you said, it's more beautiful. I won't say beautiful because but it's more freedom, and the colors and it's just more aesthetic.
Yeah.
And a healing. And so those are the kind of models that need to be enhanced, replicated, and become a model in the Suffolk County that we can replicate all across the Commonwealth. But as you're running for district attorney for the Suffolk County, the relationship with the Suffolk County sheriff, right? Because right now there's a lot of issues going on, unfortunately, at the House of Correction. The culture of violence, death, sexual assault, women who are not getting the same care, fresh air, and programming, and so forth. These are some of the things that we're hearing and you've heard in the circles. And so your relationship with the sheriff, right? Now that's up for elections. What would your relationship be with the sheriff? However that might be, that would change the culture of violence and accountability. I'm hearing people say that they should be wearing body cams. It changes how you even speak to people.
100%. So remember, local police were required. When I say local, I mean Boston.
Yes.
And remember, Suffolk County is also Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere.
Okay.
So Boston takes up a lot of air in the room, but we can't forget that Chelsea, Winthrop, and Revere are also part of Suffolk County.
Thank you.
Boston police wear body-worn cameras. Some Mass State police wear body-worn cameras. The feds do not yet wear body-worn cameras. So when you see ICE agents, for example, snatching people off of the street, there's not as many, it's not like get the body-worn cameras, let's see what happened. That's why people are being encouraged to record what they can from distance, where they're safe and not interfering or accused or alleged to be interfering. What's interesting is, as much as the community realized, I think about 8 years ago when I first ran for office, how important it was to kind of monitor law enforcement, many people don't realize that prisons and jails, there's law enforcement. They're just completely invisible to our eye because we don't get to go into Nashua Street.
That's right.
Or South Bay.
That's right.
Or, Devons or, wherever. MCI Norfolk,
Shirley.
Right, Shirley. So Concord Farms or wherever. Boston pre-release. We don't, the public doesn't have access. And the individuals there have already been discredited. Right.
Yes.
Nobody, I put it in quotes, nobody believes them because you're already a criminal.
That's right.
Right. So anything you say, the joke is, right, everyone's innocent here, right? Nobody did a thing. And so there's a part where predators prey on people they know won't be believed. They have an eye for that. I'm in no way saying I believe all correctional officers are predators, but I also think that there are individuals that are aware of the gaps in the system and they take advantage of that.
Yes.
So I believe not just for the community at large, but I think even for the correctional officers, having body-worn cameras really cuts through a lot of the questioning regarding what it is that actually happened. And I think a real interesting point we have to look at is Stevenson King and Officer O'Malley, for example.
Yes.
The shooting that happened right on Linwood, I believe, Square. And so there's a piece of this where even though there's body-worn camera none of us have seen, the current DA has not released it, there's going to be an argument from all of Officer O'Malley's attorneys. And remember, he has the same lawyers that Karen Reed had.
Yes.
He has David Yannetti as a lawyer. Very fascinating that Yannetti can represent a woman who's accused of murdering a police officer and then a police officer who's accused of murdering a community member, right?
Yes.
I wonder and hope Yannetti's will represent, Black people that are accused of murder too, right? But I don't know what his background is. I can't, that's not a disparagement, but he's handling very elite cases, I think, where people can afford his price. But I think there's going to be a lot of questions about the body-worn camera. There are, I'd say, 80 or 90% of the videos that you see, you can say, this is very clear. Rachel didn't spit on this person or didn't do that or what have you. Now, one could always say, well, the body-worn camera doesn't turn on for however many seconds before it starts. There's always nuance there. But I do think having body-worn cameras or actually having cameras in places where there's no secret pockets inside of carceral facilities will eliminate a lot of the problems. And more importantly, if the cameras go down or if they're moved, quote unquote, accidentally and a harm happens, the only way you change that behavior is if then the prisoner's version is assumed to be accurate. If some malfunction occurred, on behalf of the prison or the jail. So I think it would be a good step.
Senator Miranda also has posed legislation for oversight of correctional officers. COAST, I believe, is the acronym, and this would afford. So, should there, in addition to body cams, there being repercussions. So, if a person if an officer someone's killed at the hands of a correctional officer, and people are pointing out that officer, even correctional, and they're now getting retaliation because you're calling the person out and holding them accountable. And again, you're not supposed to have a voice, so literally you're beaten, and you're all so you get to still show up to work every day, though this is being investigated. If you kill someone in community, you are locked up.
Yeah. Well, are you? I mean, so there's very little oversight
Hmm.
of prisons and jails.
Yes.
When I was the United States Attorney,
Yes.
the entire Massachusetts Department of Corrections, not one location, writ large, the whole Mass DOC,
Yes.
was under a consent decree by the Department of Justice, which the Attorney General,
Yes.
represents every state agency when it's sued. So I need your listeners to understand this. If the Department of Corrections murders somebody, some CO kills somebody, or somebody dies in prison or prison, and sues the Department of Corrections, the state attorney general is the law firm for the state. So anytime the state is sued, Attorney General Campbell
Yes.
defends the state. Anytime the state is sued, former Attorney General Healy defends the state. My question is always, what do you do with your power? Right? Because you can defend the state, but you can also say to the Department of Corrections, hey, look, 9 prisoners have died in the last however many years while in solitary confinement on a mental health hold, right? Your own policies say they can only be there for, let's say, 3 days, and they were there for 9 days or 14 days or whatever. You are now on notice that if you must get training, and if you don't get training, I'm not going to defend you as the Attorney General of the state. I will refuse. And the point is that there are too many, I'm not speaking about this Attorney General at all, let me be clear, but there are too many people in leadership that are cowards, that are afraid to say, I'm going to stand on business and I'm going to say, I am no longer going to defend you. Sue me. Go to the Supreme Judicial Court and say, you have to defend me. I have qualified immunity. And because what the Attorney General can say is, I don't believe this is within the scope of your employment, or I've put you on notice. You now know that this is a harm that can happen. And if you willfully don't change the conditions, then you are assuming, you, Department of Correction, assuming the risk if somebody else is harmed that I won't defend you. You will get defense. You'll just have to pay for it yourself. And the problem is that people don't learn lessons until they have to learn lessons, or they're forced to learn lessons. So for me, a good example of that is the Sean Ellis case when I was the DA, and I was told by my entire staff, people I cared about, people I brought in with me, people I valued their opinion. There was not a single person in that office that said assent to the motion for a new trial for Sean Ellis. All of them said, no, you can't do that. The former DA had already dismissed the homicide for Sean Ellis for allegedly murdering Officer Mulligan and the armed robbery of the firearm, but Sean still had a possession of a firearm. And they kept saying to me, you have to have his then girlfriend recant her statement. You have to have all these things. And I said, stop. When are we going to look at the 3 police officers, Brazel, Acera, and, Mulligan was also one of them. But when we look at these police officers who we know were engaged in a criminal enterprise, when do we hold them accountable, right? Instead of looking at Sean or his girlfriend, when do we hold the police accountable and say, if you engage in this conduct, if you willfully look the other way, we're going to be undoing homicides. And then I believe we should have prosecuted some of those officers, because even when we look at Michael Proctor and Sergeant Good in Norfolk County with the Karen Reed trial, those 2 idiots are going to cost Norfolk County and us, our tax dollars, millions of dollars, in having to look back on all of their cases because they're racist idiots, right? Misogynistic idiots. They are Nazis. They're, hate America, right? Or claim they're great Americans, but then hate everything about us. So the only way people learn is when they feel the pain of what it is that's happened, right? And I mean with law enforcement, because they love inflicting that pain on certain communities and holding communities that have been redlined and, are in food deserts, have failing schools, don't have any green spaces. All of our communities have, mass and Cass-esque type of circumstances happening. And we have thrived through all of that. And they still hold us accountable with no grace or, look at the circumstances they were raised in. I believe these officers, somebody needs to start suing these officers and making them have to get lawyers and defend themselves. And then, honestly, even if the lawsuit fails, make them sweat a little bit, because my tax dollars, I'm an old, poor Black woman. I don't need to be paying for white, racist idiots who are making us do extra work. It's ridiculous. And the care with which they are treated, right? You know, they get lawyers, they get, you know, people defending them, they get GoFundMe's, right? And in our, you know, I'll end with Officer O'Malley the Boston police and other law enforcement have raised over $500,000 for his wife and him to pay off their mortgage. They're also looking for GoFundMe money for his legal defense. How much money has the Black community raised for Stevenson King? Right? So we need to stop pointing at other people and start helping ourselves, right? And even though Stevenson was engaged in, you know, criminal conduct, let's not try to sugarcoat this. He had carjacked somebody, punched a woman in the face and taken her car. If he deserved he deserved his day in court.
Yes.
He did, right?
Yes.
It's not the police officers. They are not the judge, the jury, and the executioner. They are supposed to detain people, bring them before a judge, and a prosecutor gets to levy charges. There's a process where, you know, Stevenson King's lawyer gets to defend him, poke holes in the prosecution's case, and then a jury of Stevenson's peers get to decide whether he did what it is that they claim he did. That was taken away from him. Now, the flip side, of course, is that Officer O'Malley deserves to come home at the end of the night, right? Nobody signs up to be a police officer to be murdered.
That's right.
Right? So we have to comply and understand that when we engage in conduct that can be viewed, and I'm not talking about furtive movements. I'm talking about ramming a car back and forth and not stopping when being instructed to do so. And if you've ever been on that street, it is the narrowest street in the world. Go up and look at what Linwood Square looks like, right off of Linwood Street. So, you know, I don't know the answers as to what's happened, but there are strong opinions on each side. But I can tell you, body-worn cameras will be a big part of that. And Officer O'Malley has an incredibly strong legal team that are fighting tooth and nail to make sure that he's found not guilty. And I'll be honest, I think looking at the way this case has been handled, he has a good chance of that being the case.
In contrast, and we had this conversation a little bit, and when you were actually part of a forum doing civic education with let me get it right, Pastor K. I don't want her to get angry at me about, I want to say the Zetas.
Yes, it was. even though I'm a Delta, but I'm like, oh my goodness, all my sorors were like, I'm sorry, what now? Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah, the Zetas, shout out to the Zetas. They do tremendous work in the community, and they are educating across the country, just general basic civics 101, which I think so many of us need. And, you know, I like to teach, Pastor, in a way that there are no bad questions. There's no stupid questions. And if I can't answer it in a way you understand, that's my failure, not yours.
So I love it because it was, you know, and so that was a forum that was open to the community. Many Pastor K was talking about it on this Sunday, the basic civic education that people got and their families got. And so that was a wonderful forum, and you're doing that kind of civic education in so many different arenas. But one of the questions that I was challenged to bring to that forum was about dangerousness hearings.
Yeah.
And I went to court just yesterday for one of the brothers who were one of our jail-based ambassadors, whom is there on a dangerousness hearing, and he was able to, one of his cases was overturned.
Yay.
The lawyer was now saying, okay, so now they want to do a bail, and he's got a 6-month plan, and the Commonwealth wanted to make the bail be $75,000. I mean, something outrageous.
Yeah.
Right. And to your point, right, and this is so just the contrast of dangerousness hearings for people who are in the community that you're going to be charged with whatever the highest degree is, and then work your way down. Yeah. In contrast to people whom are police officers, in this particular case, O'Malley, who was charged with manslaughter. And so they want to know, like, in the time frame that you are able to, that the time is exhausted. Like, to educate me and the audience about dangerousness hearings, the time frame that you are able to be there, and because he's about to exhaust that time, but now the Commonwealth wants to actually renew it.
Yeah. So here's the difference with dangerousness hearings and bail. And first and foremost, with dangerousness hearings, you get a bit more evidence discovery. You actually get it's a hearing, right? Okay. It's called a dangerousness hearing. That's different than just, the judge saying, Commonwealth, what's your position on bail, right? Okay. The thing that upset me about bail is supposed to be, will you come back? Yes. That's the question of, what do we need to do to make sure your behind comes back here, right? The next time we have a hearing date. Or I'm sorry, a court date. So what we do is we look at your history and we see, do you have any defaults? Okay. When is were you ever in court before? And when you were in court before for anything, did you show up when you were supposed to? When I was the DA, I said, I'm most interested in the last 3 years of your life. I'm 55, Pastor, right? So, for a 19-year-old, maybe the last 3 years of their life is a long part of their life, like a bigger percentage. But for me, I don't want to hear Rachel got in trouble when she was 19. Right. I'm 55, right? And once was 20 minutes late for court. So we're going to, we want a $50,000 bail to make sure she comes back. Wait a minute. That was 40 plus almost years ago. Not really. The math isn't right, but you know what I mean? It's like decades ago. What are we talking about? So when I was DA, I said, I'm most interested in the last 3 years of your life, what you've done when you went to court. There's also no sort of range. Bail is like this weird amorphous thing where, there's not sort of guidelines per se of, if it's a shoplifting, we ask for $0 to $200. If it's, there are some things there are some crimes where you are statutorily entitled to either bail or dangerousness. With homicides, there's not a shall. You may be granted bail, but not shall, yes, right? Yes. So remember, I think bail is about, will you come back? Dangerousness, and bail is money, right? Or conditions that would make it so that you will return back to court. There's case law now in our Commonwealth that makes, that encourages requires actually prosecutors to say, what are the conditions that might not even include money to make sure that you'll come back, right? Can we put a bracelet on you? Yes. Can we, give you geographical restrictions where you can't be in certain neighborhoods? Can we give you, we call it a Cinderella, right? Like, you have to be home by 7 p.m. and you can leave at 7 a.m. But if you're, it's the Cinderella, right? So, but dangerousness is different. Dangerousness, we also look at your background, but we look to see what crimes you've committed in your past. Are they considered dangerous crimes, right? Do you have gun cases? Do you have crimes of violence? And so there are many people, and they've spoken to me too, when I've gone to the House of Corrections or the Department of Corrections to say, for example, O'Malley, he killed somebody and he didn't get a dangerous, he doesn't have a criminal record.
That's it.
Right? So, there's people in law enforcement that say back, and you can think it's harsh, you worked hard to be dangerous. You have 6 gun cases, right? Now, you might have good reason for each of those, but you have 6 gun cases. And you know who doesn't? Officer O'Malley. And by the way, he had a licensed firearm that was part of his uniform that he used when he brandished it and screamed at Stevenson King to put the car in park, stop moving, turn the car, or turn the car off, all the different demands and commands that he gave. And the firearm he discharged was licensed, registered, and legal. Yeah. The firearm you used, you are a precluded individual, so you don't have a license to carry. You can't get a license to. So not only do you not have a license to carry, because of your criminal history, you couldn't ever get a license to carry, or because of your age, if you're under, right now, I believe the Commonwealth is looking to try to lower the age to get a firearm to 18. But anyway, so I just think there are so many differences between O'Malley and many of the individuals that are asking me this. And they can say, well, that's not fair. You know, I grew up in it. Okay, wonderful. But what it is a fact, is that he doesn't have a criminal history. Or if he did have a criminal history, the Boston Police Department looked at it and made the determination that it wasn't going to preclude him from going to the academy and becoming an officer. The firearm he used was licensed and registered. He had a license to carry himself, and it was part of his uniform. And he was engaged in his sworn duty when he came into contact with Stevenson King. One of the last things I'll say about the Stevenson King situation is Officer O'Malley received a 911 call, right? This wasn't like he was out in the streets looking for Stevenson King and had some vendetta. He responded to a 911 call about a carjacking. So there are many differences between Officer O'Malley and many of the men that are speaking, and I will say to me about, well, why didn't he get a dangerousness? Because he's not dangerous. And, you know, you are, right? And that's not me speaking. That's the way the criminal justice system looks at you. They pull your record, and it's sad. Pastor, you know that I teach at DYS. I teach in the Commonwealth Secure Detention, which is otherwise known as the murder unit. And I teach in Suffolk County Detention, which is all Suffolk County cases, all male. The Commonwealth Secure Detention is statewide young men that are charged with a homicide or murder in our Commonwealth. And I'm waiting, hopefully, to get into the Mariposa unit, which is the young women's unit, to teach. But what's interesting is many of those juveniles don't understand that the time you serve in DYS is dead time. It does not get counted toward your, you don't get credit for the time served in DYS because they look at DYS as being restorative. It's not even under the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, which is where the Department of Corrections is. It's under the Executive Office of Health and Human Services is what DYS reports up to. So they look at DYS as different than jail or prison, even though they're detained. Right. So, but I will say a lot of those juveniles believe, well, my record is private. Once I become an adult, my record is gone. We see your whole record, right? So maybe the rest of the world can't see your juvenile record, but every member of law enforcement, when I was a federal prosecutor, when I was the federal prosecutor, the U.S. attorney, when I was an assistant district attorney in Plymouth on a rotation, or when I was the DA in Suffolk County, we see your juvenile record. We know everything that you've done. And so I want to make sure our community is educated about that, right? Because a lot of people believe, oh, well, I took a quaff. It was dismissed. It's gone. No, fool. That's still on your record, right? Still on your record, right? And when, you know, think about all the things people run records for. You think you want to get a job for the state? You want to get a job for the city? I mean, geez, you want to get a job for the feds, right? You have to get a background check, right? Some of these, when you apply for housing, right? You know, some of these entities will run your background. There's legislation, I think great senators and state reps that are working to make sure that an eviction isn't a death sentence, right? That a landlord, you know, it's almost like sealing your eviction record as opposed to, or just like sealing your criminal history. So there's a big difference between dangerousness and bail, but O'Malley wasn't dangerous in the eyes of the criminal justice system. And all the men that are speaking to us at South Bay or Nashua Street have gun cases, domestic violence, stabbings, things that the community looks at. And when you are considered dangerous, there's no amount of money that gets you out. You're just in there for a certain amount of time that then lapses and can be renewed if possible, or you get different hearings at different points.
Thank you for that. So gun violence continues to impact many Boston neighborhoods. What specific strategies would you implement to reduce illegal gun violence?
this weekend is a really good example of just escalating violence in Boston. It's offensive when, and I get it why she does it, but the mayor and the current DA love saying we're the safest city in the United States of America. But it's like, no, it's safe where you live, right? In Roslindale on the edge of West Roxbury or wherever you live, or you moved in from Milton and now you live in Hyde Park or wherever I live in Roxbury, right? So of the 13, so there were 5 separate shooting incidents over July 4th weekend.
Yes.
4 of those 5 shooting incidents happened in Roxbury. That's B2. Of the 5 shooting incidents, 13 people were shot, 2 fatally. Both fatalities happened in Roxbury. So we have Fayston Street, we have Horridon Way, Castlegate, Franklin Hill and Shandon Road, Draper Street, Shirley Street, Homestead, I think was a stabbing. And there was also a stabbing on Gordon Street in Brighton, which is D14. Those numbers are the districts of where the Boston police sort of are located. So B2, everyone knows, is in Roxbury. C11 is the Draper Street one where somebody was shot. That's Dorchester. And Brighton is D14. But yeah, B2 has the majority of the shootings that are happening. You know, I think we can do things where we need to start documenting all of the firearms that we come into contact with. There is, you know, they should all be entered into a database. We're seeing that certain firearms, illegal firearms, are being cycled throughout the community to commit different harm. So if I have a gun and I'm allowing several of my other friends to use that firearm, we're seeing stuff like that. You know, I think we can have community responses. We used to have gun drop situations where if you want to get rid of a firearm, I get it. It's easy for me to say that as opposed to the commissioner of the Boston Police Department, where it's like, well, wait a minute, you don't get to kill 4 people and then drop the gun off and we promised we aren't going to prosecute you. But there used to be circumstances where we could say, you know, there's a safe harbor where you can drop a firearm off. You know, we will fingerprint it and do ballistics, etc. But it's a matter of getting a gun off the street. There used to be gun court where all of the gun cases we could, you know, there would be one court in sort of the Suffolk County area that handled those cases, or a judge that was able to see all of the different gun violence across Suffolk County. Remember, Boston has the Boston Municipal Court and we have Chelsea District Court in Suffolk County. So Boston actually handles all of the court cases for not only Boston, but for Winthrop and Revere as well. Well, Winthrop goes to East Boston, Revere goes to Chelsea, but there's a municipal court and a Chelsea District Court. If one of those had a gun court, we could really start centralizing all of the gun cases and hopefully start looking at data and seeing patterns. The other thing, Pastor, is like, we know when shootings happen, right? Like there's all this data about like, it's very rare to believe that a shooting is going to happen on Tuesday at noon, right? We know that upticks in violence and shootings in particular happen, not always, but oftentimes on, you know, Friday evenings or Saturday evenings or long weekends or holiday events. And what is a little frustrating to me, you know, and again, I'm not the commissioner of the Boston Police Department, but we have all these police sent to the Esplanade for the 4th of July, but we know that certain communities that there's an uptick in violence. I'm not saying flood the streets with law enforcement that doesn't know us or isn't from our community, but we need community policing where people are walking the beat, where you know the police officers in your neighborhood, where depending on where you live, if it's Dorchester Ave, that, you know, we have Vietnamese police officers that can engage with community in language as well as just culturally competent with respect to where we all are. We have Cape Verdean police officers on Bowdoin, right? We have, you know, and I'm not racializing
Sure,
police,
sure.
but I'm just saying we have people that grew up in Mattapan or, aren't like Google, what's Franklin Hill, like there has to be some thoughtfulness put into how we police our community, how we engage in our community, how we love and respect our community. And remember, yes, there are individuals that perpetrated those 5 separate and distinct shooting incidents, but there were hundreds of other people that did not have firearms, did not initiate violence, and were harmed, right? Or terrified, or diving behind cars, or, running to circumstance, to protect themselves and their families. And that's all trauma that we need to make sure we are rendering services. And I just hate the fact that it feels so much now like everything is reactionary instead of proactive. To say, it's the 4th of July weekend, right? We're warning you. We get it. Get lit, drink if you're over 21, right? But if you're driving and you're drinking, you're getting arrested, right? If you have open containers, stay on your porch if you're going to be drinking, right? Like, don't walk around with Hennessy or,
How about smoking weed?
I mean, well, that's another thing. Weed is legal, but there has to be something where it's like, we're going to be monitoring this, and you think it's oversight, but we're actually doing it because we want to make sure you party and enjoy yourself, which you have every right to do.
Sure.
But you're doing it in a way where everyone's safe. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think you have more street credibility when you've actually shown up before and they know who you are, when you can say, Rachel, do you need to have one more drink? Right. We know you've had enough. I love you, but how about some water? Right. And if a law officer said that to me because they've seen me before or they know that I struggle with, I don't, but let's say struggle with drinking or something like that.
Sure.
When it's said in love and it's not said the first time, I think it can work. And that's what I wish for us, is that we could have more community policing, less reactive policing, more proactive involvement. And, when there is harm, a deep push of services, treatment, and opportunity in our community. Because, B2, not just the police officers that are saying they're understaffed, but the community itself has been riddled with violence this whole weekend. And, I don't want to hear we're the safest city in America when in Roxbury or B2 area, it doesn't feel like that. Right. And it's insulting to the 2 people that lost their lives, and the 11 people that are some of whom are clinging to their lives right now.
You previously served as Suffolk County District Attorney. Why have you decided that now is the right time to seek that office again?
I don't believe the office is operating to the level that it could. There was such excitement and innovation and community involvement when we had the privilege of leading that office back in 2018, when we ran as a community and won in a landslide. And I wasn't an incumbent, Pastor, right? Like, Newman Flanagan is a name that many of your listeners might not remember. He was an old Irish DA about 30 plus years ago. He just passed away recently. And of course, got a glowing write-up in the Globe. He was racist, right? And had policies where in cross-racial homicides, if the victim was white, every black juror would be struck from the jury. That was a known policy that Newman Flanagan had. So he did not believe black people were entitled to a jury of their peers. And he would argue, I believe, because I've spoken to him about this, that he was focused on the victim. But, he believed white victims couldn't get justice if there were black people on jurors. So what's interesting is I look at Newman Flanagan with all of his flaws. He was the last DA that ran for office and won without being an incumbent. After him, Ralph Martin got the job, but only because he was appointed by a Republican governor.
Mm-hmm.
After him, I believe Dan Conley got the job, but only after somebody they really wanted died. And then Dan Conley was appointed by a governor. When I beat Dan's protege, Greg Henning, Dan resigned, right, and went to a law firm, and there was an appointment made. I ran and earned that position with the support of the people of Suffolk County. So we had written policies, Pastor.
Mm-hmm.
People were able to look and say, I don't like what she's doing here, or I really like what she's doing here.
Mm-hmm.
We had boots on the ground. People had my phone number or were able to get in touch with somebody in our office. And for me, responsiveness is imperative because we're government. There's nothing more enraging to me as an old Black woman when I make a phone call and I get a bot that's like, can I help you? And I say, like, speak to a representative. And they say, like, you know, Sergeant Genevieve. And I'm like, no, I said speak to a representative. You know, like, do you know what I mean? It's like, what? You're yelling at robots or you're leaving a message. Nobody calls you back.
Yep.
That's what this office is right now. It's like this DA is responsive now and out, you know, like electric sliding in the community because he needs your vote. But I'm going to ask you, have you seen him in the last 3 years? Ask who his leadership team is, right? He has virtually an entirely homogenistic, non-Black and brown leadership team of men, virtually none of whom live in Suffolk County. And there are some very powerful, wonderful women that work in that office. I'm proud to have hired, you know, the person that currently serves as his chief of staff. She is exceptional. But there's just a part of me where I feel like even the Stevenson King Officer O'Malley situation, he's having private invite-only meetings to talk about a homicide that happened in Roxbury. The people that live on Linwood Street weren't invited to a murder that happened on the corner of their street, right? Mm-hmm. The people that live on Linwood, you know, Court, I believe, square where the shooting or murder happened, there's a piece of it where it's like they weren't invited. Mm-hmm. So I just want a transparent, open office where everyone is welcome. Mm-hmm. I will meet with anyone, whether we agree or don't. Mm-hmm. You know, right now there's a forum that the community put together on July 14th for the district attorney race. And apparently they reached out to the incumbent who said he was available and the other candidate who said they were available. And I said, I don't care what the date is. Just tell me the date. I'll be there. And I said yes. And now miraculously, the incumbent has some conflict and can't come and is now having a fundraiser with rich white people somewhere. So, you know, and I can say that because I'm half white, but I'm just like, look, we need to really pay attention because if special interest groups and white partners at law firms that come into our city during the day and then go back to Waban and Weston and Wellesley and Winchester and, you know, go to West Tisbury or on Nantucket, like this guy, because when they give him $1,000, it gives them access and he'll dismiss a case if they call because one of their wealthy clients' kids that goes to Harvard or BC, you know, raped somebody or got a DUI or punched somebody in the face at a bar in Boston. That's not the way our criminal justice system needs to work, right? His hero is Dan Conley. I beat Dan Conley's protege last time. I'm going to beat him again. And I just think we need to bring this office back to the community.
With 4 minutes, during your previous tenure, you experienced both praise and criticisms. What lessons did you learn from that experience, and how have those lessons prepared you to lead again?
So as DA, lots of praise, lots of criticism. But it's like some people say, judge me by my enemies. Right? If the Herald is writing that she's crazy because she believes people with mental health issues deserve mental health treatment and not in the House of Corrections,
so be
thank you. Right? Like, and more importantly, there's a part of me as U.S. Attorney. I think lots of praise, very proud of much of the work I did there. We created, for the first time in the history of New England, a standalone human trafficking unit when I was U.S. Attorney. I was told by virtually everyone in the U.S. Attorney's Office, what are you doing? We don't need this. There's not a lot of human trafficking. To which I said, no, I know you don't think there's a lot of human trafficking because you don't pick up the phone on the weekends or after 5 p.m. So the Suffolk DA's office has to handle all the goddamn, human trafficking that's happening because you guys are home for the weekend
That's right.
or working remotely.
Mhm.
So over much, complaint, we institute not only a human trafficking unit, but 4 full-time people in that unit. And guess who has the busiest human trafficking unit in the United States of America right now? The District of Massachusetts, right? No thanks, of course, coming from my former colleagues, but it's a matter of like, Black women are usually right. Let's just get it out there in the streets, right? And we are often, the most criticized, least protected,
Yeah.
etc. And so there's a part of me where there have been accusations and allegations against me as the U.S. attorney. My attitude in response to that is they're nothing but that, right? And at the end of the day, I remain immensely proud of the work I did there. I believe fully that but for me being there still would be no Black prosecutors in that office on the criminal side. We were lucky to hire 4 or 5 of them in my short tenure. And we did a lot of work